Today on Forbes, here's how the presidential polls might be wrong. Polling for the 2024 presidential election shows the candidates in a dead heat, but experts say polling accuracy is complicated. President Donald Trump's intense, typically less engaged voter base has complicated presidential election polling in recent years, and as the election approaches without clear trends in polling data, experts are evaluating the theories behind where 2024's polling may be accurate and lacking. In 2020, presidential polling was called the, quote, most inaccurate in 40 years, and still inexplicably predicted President Joe Biden's win by more than 3 percentage points of his eventual margin, with some believing the pandemic caused less survey engagement and failed to capture Trump's support strengthening, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing a panel of polling experts. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was widely projected to win by sweeping the key blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, but was edged by Trump in all three and lost handily. But the 2018 and 2022 midterm election polling were relatively accurate, further complicating pollsters' understanding of the factors at play. Now, concerns around polling have returned as the race continues to be nearly tied, with concerns on both sides that incorrect polling figures, even a, quote, small systematic polling error, could unpredictably skew the results, writes prominent statistician Nate Silver in the New York Times. Silver and other experts are concerned about so-called herding in polls. Herding explains how pollsters aim to protect their reputation by skewing toward a more widely acknowledged election result instead of an outlier that might be terribly wrong. The effect is more common in the last days of an election. Earlier this week, Silver raised concerns on X about herding, saying, quote, there are too many polls in the swing states that show the race exactly as Harris leading by 1 point, a tie, or Trump leading by 1 point. Silver said that there, quote, should be more variance than that. In political polling, dozens of firms survey thousands of people in many different ways, from mail surveys to phone calls and online surveys. Often, pollsters use a combination of outreach methods. They then employ several methods to try and make polling data more accurate, such as weighting it or interviewing tactics to ensure more trustworthy results. This year, perhaps attempting to make up for misses the last few election cycles, pollsters are weighting their polls more than before. Some are concerned that might be skewing the polls. Nate Silver says, if anything, the polls show that a surprise is therefore equally likely for each side. What is weighting? Weighting emphasizes survey data, like a respondent's sex or age, that pollsters believe is underrepresented. During the 2018 midterm election, pollsters weighted by education to trim state polling inaccuracies in 2016's presidential election polling figures, which did not accurately reach voters with less education, according to the New York Times. After 2020, pollsters increasingly started weighting by what's known as recalled vote, or who the respondent recalled previously voting for, to make sure they were capturing enough Republicans. But some experts are concerned that emphasizing the recalled vote has flaws. Respondents might not remember their vote correctly and falsely record they voted for the winning candidate. For some polling operations, the recalled vote could inaccurately shape their predictions by reflecting opinions about a previous election. Even so, 2 in 3 polls used this technique in September, the New York Times reports. Then, there are multiple types of bias that pollsters worry can influence poll responses. Recency bias is the inclination to think the person who won most recently will win again. Voters might predict Trump will be the next president because he won in 2016. Non-response bias accounts for certain groups who show disinterest in taking polls. In the past, Trump supporters have tended to be less responsive to surveys and polling outreach, suggesting that polls end up underestimating them. But this year, some Democrats wonder if polls are similarly undercounting their traditional key demographics, including black voters and young voters. The so-called Patchwork Theory says that the errors made in polling in 2016 and 2020 are entirely unrelated to each other and unrelated to midterm elections. These elections both faced a set of unique factors that led to the polls being wrong. Some argue that polls overrepresenting college-educated individuals and undecided voters pushed 2016 polls in Clinton's favor. Others point out that in 2020, the pandemic's widespread influence on people's lifestyles and decisions affected the polls drastically. For full coverage, check out Stephen Pastice's piece on forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.